Just talking a little bit about SAT, ACT. How many students here took the PSAT in the last week? Okay, great. And you'll get the results back somewhere around Christmas break, either just before or just after. I'm not sure. Every school's a little different when you get that. How many got their October SAT results back? They're back today, so I don't know if that's good news or bad news, but okay. So just how many students here have, or parents have thought about having their children take the ACT? Okay. How many have heard of the ACT? Okay. All right. ACT is gaining a lot of popularity. Right? It's been around for a long time. It used to be more. SAT has been the dominant test on the coasts, East Coast and West Coast, whereas the ACT is more dominant in the Midwest and in the South. All colleges will accept either test, right, the SAT or the ACT. SAT is an aptitude test, or originally it was supposed to be an aptitude test, right? A lot of people would question that now and say that really it's just a test of how good you are at taking tests. ACT is designed to be more of a knowledge-based test, and so there are some differences. SAT, you get a quarter point off for everyone you get wrong, except for on the Griddens and the math. On the ACT, there's no guessing penalty. You don't get things off for guessing. The timing is a little different between the tests. Nationwide, they tend to find that women and some minorities do better on the ACT than they do on the SAT. What I tell people is you take both tests as a practice test. I offer people, if they want to come into our office, we'll give them a free practice ACT. We grade it and then convert it for you to an SAT score, because most colleges on the East Coast are going to convert it back to an SAT score because that's what they're used to dealing with. Okay? But you make an educated decision. See which one is better and then decide which one you're going to take. Another advantage for the ACT is that a lot of the colleges, how many of you have heard of SAT 2s? SAT 2s used to be called subject test, or used to be called achievement tests when I took them. Now they're called the subject test, or it's a knowledge-based test more than an aptitude test, right, within a specific subject. But the highly selective colleges will require the SAT plus SAT 2s, right, plus usually 2s. Some schools still require 3 SAT 2s. A lot of them will take the ACT in place of the SAT and the SAT 2s, and so it's a good opportunity to kind of cut down on the testing. In terms of preparing for the test, well, actually before we go to the next item, talk about preparing for the test, just a general timeline. I believe now that all students in Milford have the option of taking the PSAT as a sophomore. It used to, when I was here, they only allowed honors English, but I spoke to the guidance counselor in the last week, and all students can take the PSAT as a sophomore. If I recommend that they would do so. Again, it's just you get used to that test taking, what the questions are like, right? As a junior, it counts for what they call the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test, okay? And that is, if you see students are National Merit semifinalists, finalists, commended. And while that really is the only reason that a college would see your PSAT scores, if you became a National Merit Scholar or commended, you still should take the PSAT, even if you say, well, I'm not going to be commended, so it doesn't make sense for me to take it. It's preparation, right? It's getting you ready for the SAT, getting the diagnostic back on which areas you need to work on. And again, the best way to prepare for the tests is to take practice tests, right? And of course, the College Board is biased because they have a reason to show this, but their studies have shown that people who take the PSAT do better, right, on the SAT. And a lot of it would make sense. It's just they're preparing ahead of time, right? And so people who prepare the most and have the most options, and that's how you'll do the best on the test. I recommend families consider, if you're a junior, you've already taken Algebra 2, that they consider taking the SAT for the first time in December of their junior year. And the reason is that you can have it done by the end of your junior year then. You take it in December. The January test is almost always the same week as the exam schedule for Milford, so I would not recommend that you make your students take an SAT at the end of exam week. They're going to be fried as it is, so if they were going to take it early, I would go with December. And then you get the scores back, and then you can prepare and decide if you're going to take it again in March, right? And then you would still have March, May, or June to take it too. Again, the same, the thicker the file, the thicker the kid. You usually don't want to take it more than 3 times, right? In colleges, there comes a point when you have to accept the score or you take an ACT. Unless, of course, you're a recruited athlete who needs a minimum score, or something changes. You know, if you've taken it 2 or 3 times, you haven't prepared before, and you're finally going to get serious about it, then yes, you take it another time. The only colleges who really care how many times you're taking the test are those highly selective colleges, right? Again, think of it. They're not looking for a reason to accept you. They're looking through your application for a reason to reject you, right? Whereas, you know, vast majority of schools are looking through your application with the reason to accept you. Okay. But a lot of schools actually, they want to see that you're trying to take it more times to try to improve yourself. I had a student last year, he applied to the University of Pittsburgh, and we sent everything in early, and then, you know, when the decisions were coming out, we called them and said, well, when will we hear? They go, oh, we're waiting for his SAT scores from his senior year. They assumed he was going to take it again, even though he had done well in his junior year, and had decided that that was it. So some schools expect you to take it a number of times. But again, I recommend if they're just in Algebra 2, I would wait until March of the junior year to take it. And then you still have May or June. If you're in AP classes, if a student is in AP classes, I recommend that they take the SAT 2s or the subject tests in May. It's the same week as the AP exams, and then that way everything is fresh in your head. Because the SAT 2s are a knowledge-based test. Okay, if they're not in an AP, and it would have to be an AP that had a corresponding SAT 2. If you're in AP European, there's no SAT 2 in European history. There's a world history for the SAT 2. But if you're in AP US history, there is an SAT 2 in the US history. So you would probably want to take them the same week while you were studying anyways. Otherwise, I would recommend SAT 2s for June, right at the end of the year while you're getting ready for the exams. And not everyone, remember, not everyone has to take the SAT 2s. And so it's why it's important to start early because, you know, if you're thinking of the highly selective colleges, you may want to take an SAT 2 in your sophomore year while you're in that class. If you're thinking of med school, right, you may want to take biology, the SAT 2 at the end of your sophomore year. Okay. And you'll need two or three of the SAT 2s. Okay. Preparing for the standardized tests, you know, basically over the long term it's reading, right? The people who do best on the standardized tests are voracious readers. Really, you know, when you're in a short term, what are the things that you can do? One, practice, right? Take practice tests. College Board has a free question of the day. Sign up for that. Take the question, you know, do the question of the day every day. Math on the SAT is not difficult. It's tricky. It's getting used to the way they ask the questions, and it's also reacquainting yourself. There's arithmetic on there. You may not have done some of the things on the test since middle school, right? So just getting used to how to do that again, refreshing your mind. Reading. I recommend that, you know, students sign up for the New York Times online, right? And read at least one opinion article a week. You can do that for free, right? Register for it online. I would print it out just to get used to underlining and circling things as you're reading. Again, unfortunately, when I do SAT prep, a lot of the things that we do with students aren't going to help them much beyond, you know, beyond the test. One of the things that does help them is learning to be a good reader, right? Learning how to highlight, how to pull out the most important information and look at the point of view. Because when you get to college, if you're in a history class, you're going to read 6 or 7 books in one semester. You're not going to have time to reread those books cover to cover when it gets to the exams. So you need to learn to be an efficient studier, right? To highlight and pull that information out ahead of time. But the vocabulary on the New York Times approximates that will be on the SAT. Again, most newspapers are written at a 6th to 8th grade level. The New York Times is written at more of a college level. So read an opinion piece. There's almost always an opinion piece on the SAT. Practice when you're reading it. What position is this author taking? What is he or she trying to convince me of? Okay. Build vocabulary, right? For the sentence completions, vocabulary is critical. Even in the reading, it helps. There are a lot of words that show up as answer choices in the reading passages that a lot of students don't know. Nostalgia shows up as a common tone in a reading question. A lot of students are like, I don't know what that is, right? So nostalgia, having the positive memories of the past. Another one is pragmatic, that shows up a lot in the answer choices for the reading questions. And a lot of students don't know what that is. And it used to be you would read it in the history books when you read about Franklin Delano Roosevelt. They always described him as pragmatic and a pragmatic approach. And now they are using that in some ways about Obama, a pragmatic approach, so practical. But The vocabulary helps students not just on the sentence completions, which are strict vocabulary, but in understanding the questions. If you can't understand the question, how are you going to answer the question? Right? ACT Student, actstudent.org is the website for the ACT. So going on there and taking practice questions, there's a full free practice test there. There's a free practice test on the College Board website. So again, taking them timed, right? Getting used to the time pressure, because that's one of the things. The SAT is more choppy in that it's a bunch of, it's 7 25-minute sections, 2 20-minute sections, and then a 10-minute section. Whereas the ACT, so the overall time is actually less, but the sections are longer. It's 45 minutes, 1 hour, and then 35 minutes, 35 minutes, and 30 minutes for the essay. But they have a lot of information they want you to answer in that amount of time, so getting used to the time pressure of the test. Does anyone have questions about test prep or... Okay? All right. I think everyone's still in shell shock from the $50,000 a year, so I'll wait for the jaws to close before I ask questions again. Okay, next.